So regardless of the route, right, like you said, it's not just one route, it's like, and so I'm understanding that some level of investment has to be made, and infrastructure, personnel, a lot of these physical kind of investments, but also I would guess that there has to also be some sort of cultural change in the organization to go through this journey. So what would that entail? What sort of cultural changes and maybe even organizational structure changes?
No, thank you for asking that question because I think this is one area where I have seen a lot of enterprises failing at the end of the day, right? While they have made serious investment in infrastructure, in personnel, upskilling them, buying the right software, etc., but the org structure and the overall culture, the like you said, data driven.
Right.
Now the company is data driven. When I said every decision, it's a big cultural shift for an organization, right? So I think that is one place where I have seen many enterprises, while many have done a fantabulous job there are some who have not put enough focus on that area. So first of all, what needs to happen? This whole data and data driven decision making, if we have to make that real, this has to be elevated within the organization. So what it means is that there has to be a CXO role created. So it's not kind of under a particular organization, the second level under that one. It has to be as important as a marketing organization where you have a CMO. It's a finance organization where you have a CFO. You have a sales organization where you have a CSO many times, right? Chief Revenue Officer. Similarly, you need to have a chief data analytics officer. A lot of companies are doing that today. CDAO as that is called, or CDO that is called, right? But first of all, this needs to be elevated so that the whole business of data is a discipline in its own and not part of kind of something else. So that is one big thing. And then if you do that, then the rest of the org follows, where there is a whole CDO organization or CDAO organization who in different ways they can interact with the other stakeholders because they work with all of them. But I think which is even more important, because this still happens and is happening more and more now. Look at many Fortune 500 companies, there is a CDO or a CDAO role, and they're doing some really big changes, right, as far as the organization is concerned. But you talked about the culture. The culture that is needed when you have to be data driven is a culture of celebrating failures, right? And I'll explain why I'm saying that. A data driven culture means that it needs a lot of experimentation. It means that either I have evidence on which I'm making a decision, or I don't have evidence. So therefore I have to generate evidence, right? I have to generate data by doing certain things. How will you know that walking the right path is better than walking the left path? Right? If many people have actually walked both the path, you can see how many have reached the destination. And you can do a very simple analysis and say the right path has a much higher probability of doing that. But if nobody has walked the left path at all, everybody has walked the right path, then you don't even know, right, what it is. And the only way to answer that question is by actually walking the left path, knowing fully that it can lead to failures. That kind of I'll have out of 10 people, at least 3 people walk the left path, so that I can collect some data as to what happens. But there's a very high chance that I'll fail. But remember that this failure, as they say, is the pillar for the success. That now it is in unequivocal term, you can say that the right path is the best path to go. If you have proved on the contrary, nothing like it. So as they say, right, that many times the outcome of an data-driven work or an analytical piece is either to make a new discovery, that is in this case, the left path is a new discovery, nobody had walked that path before, or it confirms a known fact. you're already walking the right path. The fact that it is the right path is being now confirmed with data. So you can now walk that path far more confidently.
Yeah.
And can say that, look, we have explored all the possibilities and this is the best one and I'm doing it. It's very different from saying, oh, I don't know what will happen otherwise, but I have always walked the right path. It's a very different approach. So please keep in mind that if an enterprise has to become truly data driven, they have to do lots and lots of experiments. And when they're doing experiments, there is always some experiments will succeed, some will fail. Obviously, you'll have to fail fast. You can't wait for, kind of the full length, kind of after 6 years, you cannot say, sorry, we tried all of this for 6 years, we failed. I think in less than 6 months, you have to see enough indications that this is going to be a failure, so let me change course. But those 6 months, if it gets penalized that, oh, you did something which was completely wrong, then it breaks everything else. No matter how much you invest in infrastructure, in people, in everything else goes for a toss. So how do you celebrate that failure, that was a failure for a right reason, which will lead to many more successes in the future? I think that mindset, that culture, it obviously has to start top down. It has to start from the leaders in an enterprise. But I know it is more easier said than done. But that's something that I have seen is a big differentiator between the leaders and the laggards as far as this space is concerned.
Okay. Yeah. So again, something that I wouldn't expect to be great advice, right? Celebrate failure. But thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
So my next question actually is to you as the CEO, as one of the fastest growing companies in this space in the world. Would you we have been talking about what it means to be a data-driven business. So would you say Mathco is truly data-driven? And of course, maybe there is no such thing as one company which is like arrived at that stage. But what steps have we taken, or are we taking right now towards that? Towards that in the last few months or years.
Yeah. Again, fantastic question. The question is, do you eat your own dog food or not? Right? Look, I think you already alluded to it, right? Let me first tell you the overall summary. We can always do better.
Yeah.
And that is coming from someone, kind of who preaches to the whole world that, how you should become data driven. So for me, if I say that, we really, kill it, right? I think I'll be lying. But having said that, I think from the get-go, we have been very conscious about this fact that while we preach to the rest of the world that you should be leveraging data, data should drive your decisions, it cannot be, a 180-degree shift or a complete shift on the other side as far as our internal way of working is concerned. So what we have done is, one, again, any major decisions in the company, which starts from forecasting demand, right? Today, this is the revenue that you're earning. Last quarter, this is what you have earned. 2 quarters back. There is a lot of good data-driven analysis that goes in to try and get to that prediction as well as you can, right? I'll give you another example. I think we have now made it almost into a science of how a sales funnel for acquiring new clients, or acquisition funnel as they call it, how that converges into a real closure. That how many do you need at every stage of that funnel to have a client? I think we have we have kind of numbers and data around it. We have trends on how it changes over time. Therefore, looking at a pipeline, I can say with certain degrees of confidence that this is what 6 months down the line or 1 year down the line total book revenue would look like, right? So this is classic sales funnel analysis that we again do for our clients. We leverage this. I'll give you internal examples. The operations team, the people and operations team, that we have internally, they conduct their internal meetings with data. There's not a single meeting that happens, just saying that, oh, I have these observations, I have that observation. If you have an observation, there is to be a data that backs up that observation. Even that observation is about, hey, you know what, I think, there are certain pockets in an organization where we need to do better engaging our colleagues. right? But that statement cannot be made in that meeting without any data backing that up. And again, we have leveraged not just data-driven decision making, but the accompanying technology with that, right? So one classic example in the organization is that you have to listen to people to understand what's really happening in people's lives. So while there are we have created this organization called People Success Organization that talks to people, understand what's going on. A big part of the People Success Organization is a chatbot, is a virtual agent that we internally call as Amber, right? Now, again, leveraging the power of technology, we collect tons of data through this chatbot, and that data gets analyzed to help us understand what are the key pain points or what are the some pockets that we need to address and do better on. I can proudly say that a lot of initiatives that we take, right? So there is a program right now that we are doing which is about, so people, new joinees gets onboarded to the company, right? So there is an onboarding process for the first week. Now we are doing an onboarding when they start working for a particular client in a particular engagement. We are now onboarding them as a separate process for that account. Okay. This again came up through some data, right? We collected data and we realized that is one area where there is some discomfort that is getting created, and we are doing it. So I'm saying there are, I think, many areas where we are pushing to ensure that we are talking with data, talking with evidence. But can we do better? Absolutely, we can do better. Right? So that will, I think, that answer will always be the same.
Right. But yeah, I think from what you've answered, for a company that's going to be 7 years old, right? I think it's a great place to be in.
Absolutely, yeah.
You are somebody who has, correct me if I'm wrong, around 25 years of experience in this space, right? Yeah. What would be your, in your experience, what have you seen are the common mistakes that companies make or business leaders make in, when they're going through this journey of, trying to become data driven? And what would your advice be to them?
Sure. I think I have alluded on that a little bit already, but I'll repeat that, and I'll emphasize on that or illustrate that a little more. The first thing first, one mistake that I've seen is where people are trying to become from a data ignorant to what you just said, data driven overnight.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes I've seen some enterprises feel that there's a magic. There's a magic wand that if I, kind of do like this, or if I move my wand, kind of suddenly, voila, kind of everything comes up. So it never happens that way. It's a journey. It's a long journey. It's a difficult journey. So we have to be prepared to go through the right stages, take the whole organization along, and things like that. So that is one very important part which I've seen people not doing right and therefore failing in the process. The second one is what I mentioned about this culture of celebrating failures. While we all celebrate success, if you are not able to build a culture where you celebrate failures, it will be extremely difficult for that organization to really become data driven, because there will always be this sense of fear that, oh, in order to become data driven, I have to try 3 different things. Some of these are new. What if I fail? Right? So that is that. I think, and a part of that culture is also to give a kind of some amount of time and runway. When you can't do an experiment once and say, oh, sorry, it succeeded, it failed. It never happens that way. There is in statistical terms, there is a problem of small sample, as we call it. Yeah. Right? So if you have only few samples, that's not a good conclusion that you're making. So that's definitely a pitfall that I would advise enterprises to avoid, for sure, to become truly data driven. So one, as I said, kind of don't expect to be a magic wand. It's a long, hard journey. Let me put it that way. It's a hard journey. It's not easy, particularly for large enterprises. And second is this whole culture of celebrating failures is very, very easy. There's another thing where I have seen organizations fail, which is kind of related, is when there is a belief that, well, as long as my team or my subordinates are dealing with data and understanding that, we as leaders don't need to get into the details of the matter. Because particularly when it comes to data, right, sometimes it can tend to get a little bit technical, right? The technology that is used, the methods that, but I think some amount of awareness. I'm not saying the CEO of the company needs to be a Python programmer. No. I know there are, really, really advanced companies in terms of data-driven decision making, where some of the execs can write probably the best codes in the company, right? So that happens. But I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm saying, but at least to understand, the different data structures, what does it mean to have data on prem vis-a-vis in the cloud? What are some of the details of that, right? Little bit more. How can data be leveraged? Why feature engineering data munging is important. What are the different categories of predictive models? What does kind of a linear model does? Why do you need a neural network at a certain stage? I think some amount of awareness and understanding also has become important, because that I've seen drives a company many miles and in a very accelerated pace in that direction. And if it is not there, then you're sometimes in trouble, because while a lot of good work gets done, it don't really kind of goes up and make a difference at the right level. So I'll also ask enterprises to watch out that is your leadership taking enough interest into some amount of details when it comes to data and data driven work.
Okay. I think that was great advice. So we come to the last question. So this is just something that comes to my mind, right? We've been talking about data driven, being data driven. I want to understand, by making a case for becoming data driven, and by saying like, oh, data will sort of dictate what I do. What are we making a case against? Could we possibly be making a case against instinctive decisions? My gut tells me this is the right thing to do. Or is there a possibility we could be unknowingly making a case against creativity and innovation, and some of the crazy ideas that might come out of it? What are your thoughts on that?
It's a good question to think about. See, the first part that you said is clearly we are making a case against that. When I talk about data-driven decision making, it only means that please don't ignore evidence before making a decision, which means that just because your instinct tells you something, or sometimes it's not even instinct, somebody may feel that, look, I have for the last 20 years been doing this. So what is called gut-based decisions, right? So my gut tells me that this is how it should be done, and the gut also comes informed with all this 20 years of rich experience. I think we are still making a case against that, because even if I have 20 years of experience, the way the world is changing, believe me, the 19 of those may not be even relevant. So then, instead of just relying on your last 1 year, and there are many examples around that. Let's take the world of marketing, right? If you look at marketing 20 years back, right, it's very different from the whole digital marketing, social, kind of being present there. All of these were not even part of the marketing, kind of the playbook, if you will, right? So there are, at least in the enterprise side, people were a lot more focused on how do I leverage TV, how do I do radio, how do I do print. Now, bulk of that conversation has moved to digital channels and which channel and whatnot. So definitely, making a case against that. Are we making a case against creativity, innovation? Honestly, I would say there is a danger of that if you become very blind, kind of in terms of being data driven.
Okay.
So what I'm not saying, I'm saying data driven decision making. That is, leverage data to make a decision. I'm not saying let data make the decision. Right? There's a big distinction between the two. I am leveraging data to make the decision. There is still a human in the loop, as they call it. Yeah. And that human's gut and experience are very important. I'm a big believer of that, and I'll continue to be a big believer of that. See, there are certain things which are very transactional, very operational, very, the same thing gets done again and again. I think a machine can make a decision on that, right? I'll give you an example. In order to approve a loan, all that a bank needs to see, I mean, at least in some of the advanced economies, that what is your bureau score? Hmm. And sometimes the decision is as unidimensional, though it may not be fully true. But suppose the decision making is unidimensional, that your score is above 750, you are approved, below 750, you're declined. Now, this is a decision that a machine can make. You don't need to have a human in the loop. But most of the time, it is not as simple. Right. Even if your score is below 750, because of who you are and some of your past records and other considerations, I may still be better off approving that loan. So there is a human component to that. I think the case we are making here is that, are you at least using data to know what is a baseline? And then there are many reasons why you might be making an exception. But do you know that you are making an exception from what the baseline is? And are you recording that so that you can go back and analyze that every time I have made an exception, maybe all the time it has worked out quite well. Then there is something wrong with the baseline or whatever the data is saying. So you go back and look at that. But you might see that maybe 30% of the time you're still right, but 70% of the time you're not right. Right? So that realization can happen only when you look at data. Right. So again, I'm not saying data to make the decision. I'm saying use data to make the decision, data-driven decision making. And definitely not a case against creativity, because creativity absolutely comes into play because data gives you a baseline. Mm-hmm. And then it is your creativity, your innovation where you experiment, you try new things. And by the way, that becomes a new data also, right? So now you can compare what this data and the previous data, put them side by side and see is so much more powerful. So let me do that. So use data to fuel creativity as well, right? Again, creativity, without data is like, like a boat without a sail, like a ship without a sail, right? It will be, just moving here and there, right, in water. But if it is guided by a, proper sail with a mast and all, it will go. While you are being very creative, you still want to go towards a destination. Right? If you're a musician, even if you're very creative, you still want to create good music, be it a nice tune, be it a good song, whatever it is. But and for that, nowadays, by the way, there is a lot of data that gets collected. That kind of when I do this combination of tones, notes, then what happens? If you're not being disciplined about it, and data is nothing but another word for discipline that builds into your overall approach, then you might not land up with anything. You're very creative. You're trying to create music, but ultimately at the end of the day, even after few days of effort, there is no music that has come out. Is that desirable? I don't think so. I mean, there has to be a creativity, innovation has to lead to something outcome or interesting. Otherwise, the creative person will also lose interest in creativity. Right. So that's how I'll put it. That we are not making a case against creativity, innovation. In fact, we are saying that leverage data to make it even better, but definitely making a case against instinctive, pure gut-based decision. That what I know what it is. You don't need to tell me. I'm not telling you. Data is telling you. Evidence is telling you. And use that as a baseline, right? You make your call, deviate from the call. But now that becomes also data, and then look back and see, is your deviations powerful? Was that effective? If it is effective, then you have a great discovery here, which tells you that this data was probably not right. It was not telling me the right story. So we have to constantly, kind of fight that battle with data as well, and not become subservient that, okay, because data has tell me, that's it. Kind of I'll close my eyes and forget about everything else.
Right. One thing I realized from your answer is when I was asking the question, I used the word dictate, data dictated. So that's not what we want, right? What we want is data driven. So like I
didn't even hear that because that's not in my parlance at all, right? Data should not dictate your decision. Yeah. No, not at all.
So if used well, data can empower creativity and innovation. Absolutely. As well. Absolutely. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time, Sayan. It was great talking to you, and hopefully we'll talk to you again in another episode.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.